This is a Project B.A.I.T news analysis, the Rambo Report for my people. First, I want to thank you for watching the show. We do it for you and, of course, for ourselves. Let me start off by presenting you with an idea that you probably haven't really thought about or heard before. And one of the reasons why I give that introduction is because one of the people who watched the show, one of the persons who watched the show, came up to me recently and said that I present ideas or perspectives that they don't get anywhere else. Well, I'm going to give you one now. This country is crazy. This country is straight out crazy. The white folks who run this country, they're lunatics. This country is a country of lunatics. Now, you probably haven't heard it said so directly. Really, it's been edged around. For example, you've heard in the news about the opioid crisis that is particularly striking white folks in rural and suburban areas. The medical aspect of the opioid crisis is really on the physical results of taking opioids. They rarely, if ever, say anything about the mental aspect, because people who take opioids of any dimension, of any kind, are mentally off balance. That's why they want to get into programs, and why the powers that be, the stakeholders, are talking now about treatment. Well, they don't say it's treatment for medical defects, mental defects, but it is, because those folk are mentally disturbed, and that is why they're taking opioids, which produces a physical disturbance as well. And the same thing happened with us with the crack epidemic. We were mentally disturbed. So this country as a whole is a country of lunatics. Now, there's another aspect to this analysis. This country is fundamentally based on three premises: white supremacy, racism, and American exceptionalism. And you've heard this over and over and over in the news. But what you don't hear is that all three of those perspectives are mentally defective. Anybody who is a racist has a mental problem. Anybody who talks or preaches or practices or thinks about white supremacy, and pretends that they are white and supreme, is mentally unbalanced. And American exceptionalism. This has been practiced and preached in American history throughout its entire history, from the Pilgrims and how they treated the Indians, the blacks, and other nations, European nations, Asians. American exceptionalism. That is an irrational perspective, an irrational mental perspective. And in fact, it's mentally defective. And those two aspects, or those three aspects in the main, produced the genocide, the wholesale genocide of the Native American population. Tens of millions of Native Americans were slaughtered by white colonists. And those white colonists were crazy. I mean, you don't genocide people without being crazy. Hitler was crazy, and all those Nazis. Crazy, mentally insane. Well, the same thing in this country. Then you compound that with African slavery. You do not enslave people unless you are insane. You do not treat people like that. Men, women, and children. And how do we know this clearer than we've ever known it before? We know it clearer than we ever have known it before because we are being taught the truth over the internet. You see, the internet is able to take these pictures and photographs and film and produce them and disseminate them throughout the entire country and the entire world. And they're getting produced over and over again. And so much of the data that went unreported and unnoticed and uncommunicated now displays the depth, the pervasiveness of this European American insanity. So we are living, all of us are living in a nation of lunatics. So white folks are crazy by degrees. And this affects them and it affects us. And it ranges from the mild to the severe. But it is certainly mental disease. And so we and they ought to take a fresh look at ourselves and this country and the behavior that goes on in it. This has been another Project B.A.I.T. News Analysis, the Rambo Report for my people.
The Saturday Irregulars, an urban think tank, meets weekly from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. across the street from Belle Isle at the northeast intersection of East Jefferson and East Grand Boulevard. No leaders, no elections, no officers, no dues, no in-groups. Thinkers and students are welcome. A choice, not an option.
This is a Project B.A.I.T. News Analysis, the Rambo Report for my people. In the initial segment, I talked about European American insanity in this nation of lunatics. Well, black folk are also affected by it. That is, we cannot live in a nation controlled by lunatics and not have that rub off on us. And how is that done? How does that happen? As you know, black folks, and we've talked about this a lot, suffer from self-hate. And that is expressed in our attitudes towards our features, towards standards of beauty, attractiveness. And this has been put on us, and we've absorbed it. Through the discrimination, the racism, the slavery, the oppression, learned behavior. And now scientists say that it is so deep and has affected us for such a long time, it is now in our genes. That remains to be seen. But clearly our behavior demonstrates a great deal of mental challenge. And this is expressed, among other ways, in our homicide rate. I mean, black folk, we kill each other, particularly in certain groups, certain classes, in certain neighborhoods, at an extreme rate. Our value for human life is abysmal, okay? Now, this is really, to a great extent, learned behavior from the white dominant culture. because, of course, our experience with the police, and this overwhelms you if you follow it on the internet. White police officers kill blacks at the rate of 3 a day, just straight out murder. Okay, and it is now being documented and presented over the internet with the smartphones and the chest cams and the cams they have on the police vehicles. And if you go on the internet and you study it on a regular basis, it really takes your breath away because it is so consistent. There's never a day that goes by that white police officers aren't beating. I mean, literally, just oppressive beating black folk. And it's caught on camera and it's put on the internet and you see it. I see it and I think, damn. And then you try and explain it or think about it, what it means. It's because they're crazy. They're crazy. These police officers are crazy. And they work for police departments. They carry guns and they shoot people. They kill people on a daily basis. Now, when you do that, and clearly they know about it, they probably know about it better than we do, than I do, because they practice it. They talk about it. Because you cannot kill somebody and not have it affect you. The killer is also affected. All right. So that to have this happen to us on a regular basis, on a daily basis, it affects our mental stability as well. And it causes us in our community to devalue life. And so we also do an inordinate amount of killing. And it is because we have sort of lost our mental balance. Now, psychologists and analysts and mental professionals say, just in the ordinary course of human behavior, 20% of the population has, from time to time, mental challenges, emotional challenges. But I suggest in a nation like this, which has had, for example, a continuous war in Afghanistan for the past 17 years, and when you look at the entire history of this country, it has been at war for 80, 90% of its existence. And war is, clearly a mental challenge, problem. Then we have a country that is, in point of fact, a gaggle of lunatics who have put together a government and now practice that insanity on an institutional basis. And it is clear in our national government at the current time. The inmates have taken over the asylum. And this is oftentimes hinted at and sometimes directly spoken about with regard to the president, to other members of Congress, to these marches that we see these days. And it's something that we should take into consideration in terms of how we act and respond to the practices, the almost inherent practices of the power brokers in this society. This has been another Project B.A.I.T. News Analysis, the Rambo Report for my people. This is another Project B.A.I.T. news analysis, the Rambo Report for my people. As you know, I go to the library on a regular basis, and I certainly recommend that you go. And one of the books I've been struggling with recently is called The Black Power Movement. The Black Power Movement. Rethinking Civil Rights in the Black Power Era by Peniel E. Joseph. Very good book. You know, you don't hear very much about black power these days. Black politicians, white politicians, the folk who put out these black political slates, because we're in an election period, rarely, if ever, just come out and say black power. You know, it used to be very much in the public discourse back in the day, in the 60s and 70s. Once upon a time, I was involved in the Black Power movement. But as the time went on and the generations passed, you know, the black folk who were, quote unquote, integrated in the system didn't want to offend the people who were paying their checks and providing them with the good life, all right? The middle class, the American dream, all right? So they just stopped talking about black power and black identity. And the churches, the few churches that spoke about black power, they muted their voice as well. But we are in, and we have continuously been in a very difficult political and economic situation. So here in Detroit, we are being fed the propaganda that, for example, the city of Detroit is improving and moving forward, when in point of fact, if you look at scientifically, as opposed to from the point of view of propaganda, what is happening in the black community is even worse than what was happening years ago or decades ago. We are in worse shape economically and financially and in terms of city services now than we were back in the 60s and 70s. For example, we did not have mass water shutoffs back in the 60s and 70s. At least there's no evidence that has been offered that I can ascertain that this was the case. Now, we can assuredly document that water shutoffs in our community are astronomical. Land and property foreclosures, tax seizures are astronomical. So we have not done a correct analysis with regard to black power and what it means and what it should mean in terms of our political and economic practice. And the poor and the vulnerable, that is, children and the elderly, are particularly suffering because of this. During the Obama years, we got something that is unusual. We got an extension. 20 million additional people got health care. Well, in this current era, there is a concerted effort to remove what was advanced then. And make no mistake, most of the folk, and a disproportionate number of the people, if in point of fact health care, Obamacare is repealed, it's going to be black folk who are going to lose their health care. There's no doubt about that. Because, as the saying goes, the ghetto is not a problem, it is an answer to the problem. In point of fact, in our history, the ills of this society have been dumped on black people in the communities, also known as ghettos, in which we live. And it is only through the Black Power movement that we received a concerted, culture-wide information or education from our perspective on the issues and the practices of the day. And it was and is with the Black Power movement that we receive the information, the documentation of the needs of our community from our perspective, rather than through the lens of white liberals or white supremacists. So that really now we need to go back to that, return to those thrilling days of yesteryear, and look at seriously, academically, the Black Power movement and resuscitate it in terms of our political and economic practices. This has been another Project B.A.I.T. News Analysis, the Rambo Report for my people.
The Saturday Irregulars, an urban think tank, meets weekly from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. across the street from Del Isle at the northeast intersection of East Jefferson and East Grand Boulevard. No leaders, no elections, no officers, no dues, no in-groups. Thinkers and students are welcome. A choice, not an option.
Little Rock Baptist Church. Come and receive your blessings at the historic Little Rock Baptist Church, 9000 Woodward Avenue, 313-872-2900. Worship services are 10 a.m. and Sunday school 8:45 a.m. Enjoy an experience that will warm your heart and feed your spiritual soul. Little Rock Baptist Church.